They said fiery dragons were seen in the sky, a poetic lie for a profane truth. The dragons did not come from the sky. They came from the sea, and their tongues were forged of cold iron. Caelan's world was defined by three things: the silence of prayer, the light through stained glass, and the cool feel of vellum beneath his palm. Every day, before the sun had even touched the North Sea, he was in the scriptorium of Lindisfarne. The space was a sanctuary in its own right, the air thick with the smells of melting beeswax, the sharp tang of oak gall ink, and the dry perfume of books that had slept for a century. For Caelan, transcribing the holy texts was not a duty. It was the only way he knew to touch eternity. Under his skilled fingers, mere characters became gateways to the divine. The Lindisfarne Gospels were the pinnacle of that devotion, and the great L he was illuminating was not just a letter. It was a labyrinth of faith, its Celtic knots symbolizing the soul's immortality, its intertwined birds whispering tales of creation. It was a fortress built of ink and gold leaf, a testament of holy order against the chaos of the world. God does not only see your work, Caelan, he hears the prayer in every line. Abbot Aidan's voice was deep and steady, like the monastery's stone walls. His white hair was a halo in the candlelight. Our faith is inscribed in these pages. It is our legacy and our weapon against the darkness. Caelan looked up, a secret pride swelling in his chest, which he dutifully suppressed. I am but a humble instrument, Father, but that peace, meant to be eternal, had begun to fray at the edges. An unnatural storm had come weeks before, bringing no rain, only silent lightning, eerie green and violet flashes that danced on the black water. Then came the unsettling quiet of the seabirds, and then Finn, the fisherman with eyes that had seen 1,000 storms, shattered the scriptorium's tranquility. He didn't just bring the smell of salt and fish, he brought a primal, worldly fear. They were no trick of the fog, Father Abbot, he rasped, his desperation raw. I saw them as I see my own hands. Longships, like hunting fish, moving with no full sail, oars on their flanks, moving in rhythm like the legs of a great sea centipede. And the dragon heads on their prows? They did not look to the heavens. They looked at us. Brother Simeon, a young monk who prided himself on his learning, scoffed. Fishermen's tales. Too much mead, I'd wager, Finn. But Caelan saw the truth in Finn's eyes. It was not fantasy. It was the terror of a man who had seen a wolf at the edge of the pasture. Abbot Aidan sighed, laying a hand on Finn's shoulder. Fear is a seed that grows fast in the mind. Trust in God, Finn. He chose this place as his beacon. Its light will repel any darkness. The abbot was wrong. The light only attracted the moths. The death knell rang in the middle of afternoon vespers, tearing a half-sung psalm in two. It was not the call to God. It was the shriek of metal in agony. A frantic, chaotic, desperate clamor. Caelan and his brothers poured into the central courtyard, and his ordered world shattered into a million pieces. The dragons had landed. The longships now lay beached on the sand, like monstrous, stranded leviathans, but not before vomiting a tide of flesh and steel. Hundreds of warriors, taller than any man Caelan had ever seen, were storming the hill. The afternoon sun glinted off iron helms and the broad heads of axes. Their hair and beards were braided in intricate patterns, and their faces were alight with a savage glee, a revelry in destruction. The sound of their horns drowned out the sea, a sound from the throat of hell. Caelan saw Brother Elwyn, whose gentle hands knew only herbs, try to run. A thrown axe caught him in the back. He fell forward into his own lavender patch. Into the chapel. Barricade the doors. Get the relics. God will shield us, Abbot Aidan roared, trying to rally his terrified flock. Caelan's initial shock turned into a cold fear that spurred him to action. He ran, not to save himself, but to save a tangible piece of his faith. He burst into the chapel, where the air still smelled of incense, a grotesque contrast to the smell of blood that was beginning to drift in from outside. He grabbed the Lindisfarne Gospels, the very soul of the monastery, clutching it to his chest like a mother holds her child. The oaken doors, thick enough to withstand 100 winters, exploded inward under the force of a battering ram. The Northmen filled the sanctuary. They were a force of nature. They laughed at the splendor they saw, but it was the laugh of avarice, not admiration. Caelan squeezed himself into a dark alcove where old tapestries were stored, pulling a heavy cloth depicting the Passion of Christ over himself. He held his breath, listening to his own heart hammer against his ribs. Through a tear in the fabric, he witnessed unimaginable blasphemy. A warrior used his sword to pry the gems from a crucifix. Another drank communion wine directly from the silver chalice before hurling it against a wall. He saw Brother Niall, the ancient, frail librarian, trying to shield a bookcase with his body. A Viking simply shoved him aside. When he fell, the warrior crushed the old monk's bony hand under his boot heel. Then Abbot Aidan stood forth. He positioned himself in the center of the nave, weaponless, fearless, with only his faith as a shield. "In the name of the living God," he thundered, "every act you commit here seals your damnation." The leader, the giant with the fiery beard, approached. He circled the abbot, like a wolf sizing up an old ram. He let out a short, dry laugh. He said something in his own tongue, a language that sounded like grinding stones, and his warriors laughed with him. Then he spat on the floor at the abbot's feet. Without warning, he swung the axe. The blade described a perfect, gleaming arc in the dim light. Caelan tried to shut his eyes but was too slow. He saw the axe bite deep into the abbot's shoulder, near the neck. The sound, a wet, heavy thud of metal cleaving bone and flesh, would haunt him forever. The abbot did not scream. His eyes just widened in shock and pain, and he slowly crumpled to the floor. His bright red blood poured out, staining his white robes black. Caelan's world ended in that moment. He didn't know how long he hid. The slaughter, the looting, the destruction raged around him. When silence finally fell, it was heavier than the screams, a dead silence, punctuated by the crackle of fire and the whistle of wind through shattered windows. He crawled out, his limbs stiff. The chapel was a Bosch painting. The smoke stung his eyes. The coppery smell of blood and the sickening scent of burning flesh made him gag. He stepped over the bodies of his brothers, recognizing them by fragments of their robes. He found the gospel book face down in a pool of blood near the overturned altar. The cover was savaged. Trembling, he picked it up and opened it to his page. A great smear of blood, dried to a rust brown, marred the hell he had poured his soul into. The perfect beauty, the divine order, erased by a profane smudge. Clutching the book, he walked like a dead man to the beach. The monastery was collapsing into fire behind him. The longships were gone, vanished like a nightmare. He knelt on the cold sand, staring at the gray, empty sea. The abbot had said their faith was a fortress, but no fortress could stand against a nightmare that had decided to become real. Where was God, or was he just another beautiful story in a book, easily torn apart by a heathen's axe? The silence from heaven was colder and crueler than the North Sea wind whipping his face.